Hi, Tako.
Hi.
Hi. So we're here just to contribute to a small discussion to the work Halo Nevus, which is currently on show, which was originally commissioned as part of a two-person show with Rami George and yourself in the summer of 2018 at Grand Union. And as someone who was involved in the development of the work, I'm really happy to be here to be discussing with you some of the, I guess, themes and some of the methods around the making of the work. So thanks for having me, everyone. I think a lot of the things I want to discuss are about the materiality of the work and kind of about like the form and the shape of it, more so than maybe thinking about like storytelling within the work or something like that, because I think there is storytelling within there, but what is really interesting to me about this work is how there's a materiality to the images that are in the film. And by that, I mean images both in terms of like the objects that are represented, as well as bits of film that are created as sort of ways of thinking about the central object of the film, which is the birthmark that and its eponymous Halo Nevus. So I just wanted to ask about the materiality of these images in the film and how the motifs and the symbols sort of are returned to and become like choruses of one another throughout the film. And I'm specifically thinking about how some of the forms in the film kind of speak off one another. And I'm thinking about the orange peels, which have a certain significance, and the birthmark, which has obviously another significance, as well as sort of more abstract shapes that are reminiscent of them, like the drawing on a projector and the water droplets. So
yeah, thanks. This is really lovely to be able to revisit this work with you. I think we had a lot of conversations like as I was developing this work. But yeah, I actually rewatched the film for the first time for a while recently. And I think what I noticed, because hindsight is a beautiful thing, right? In that I think there are maybe like two kind of strategies that I was like thinking through or trying to think through in the work in terms of the like visual material. And like one of these is the kind of the documentary like footage that is of my mother and her allotment. And that kind of came from an impulse or a desire to capture something that was happening in the immediate, like, this moment in the allotment. And then there are, all the motifs that you speak about, which I think are kind of, and why they maybe occur in multiple is because I'm trying to reach something that is like distance from me. This whole kind of work came from a moment of distance, a moment of separation, of not being in the Gambia, of this moment of the re-election or the first unelection of Yahya Jammeh, and then the election of Adama Barrow. And so, most of these things are me alone in my studio trying to grapple with material to understand something that is happening in somewhere else, trying to like reach back to another place, another time. And I think yeah, in terms of like the water droplet. I was thinking about the image of the water droplet and also the footage of the river, which is a river in Glasgow, which is like after a very like heavy rainfall and it's kind of very swollen and like just, yeah, full and moving and rushing. And I was thinking about that in relation to the singular droplet and how that has been, and the way in which it's yeah, again, maybe removed from its context, is able to be manipulated by a voice, by something, and it's also through that is able to become something else, be able to be seen,
Yeah,
as something more than.
Yeah, and I think that those moments specifically with the water droplet and with the vibration of you know, there's like a vibration where you're rolling your R's, and there's this like response from this material that is emerging directly from your body. And I think there's like an implication of bodies, or of a body or several bodies, like throughout the work. But it never becomes like a portrait of a body in like a representational form. I think it's really interesting that these implications of bodies become sort of another materiality to think about. Yeah, some of the thematics, like even thinking about when you were talking about the filming that you did of your mum's allotment and filming her there, as well as sort of trying to engage with the Gambian elections while not being there. There's this like it's like a response to immediacy in the film, and sort of and I guess in contrast to a previous film, which there was a lot of footage from the Gambia. In this film, that distance is more evident within the way that you've treated a lot of the material. And I think there's like I think that response of the immediacy of like where your body is situated at that minute, and that being not in the Gambia, is really interesting. But yeah, I wanted to ask about the sort of the very bodiliness of the film, and particularly those moments of like the vibration coming from, your mouth, or the fact that these old photos are cropped and not in full view. Yeah, just wondering if you could talk a bit about that sort of more complex way of treating bodies rather than a simple like representation, like your body being involved within the filming process and also becoming like a material within that.
Yeah, I think that also comes from this sort of impulse to like experiment or to think with my body, which is kind of what the film is doing, is thinking through like Gambian history, my relationship to a country, a nation, through this birthmark, and came from like a simple like came from this image which doesn't open the film, but it's in the first kind of opening sequence of the film, which shows an image of like my younger self, and this mark that is on my body that is intact, or is different to how it is now. Anyway, it has changed. I have also changed. I guess it's maybe that like slipperiness of like images, and that they can like betray you in a sense. And I think what's interesting also about like revisiting this is I was in the Gambia last year, and now, and I was there during another moment of like protest, and there were these, or have continued to be these 3 years, it was a 3 years like Jotna movement, which was a movement because the current president, Adam Barrow, who was seen at the beginning of this film, agreed to only have a 3-year term, and then there to be another elections. Essentially, he was like an interim president for the country, and then refused to keep this promise. And so there were movements again, but I found that in the kind of like international reporting of this, then this Al Jazeera interview was the image that was now being used for him. Like, whereas before in this film, it is this very like hopeful image, like it's a new birth, it's a new era, it's like, yeah, it's exciting. And then in this image, like it suddenly turns and he becomes seen as like becoming another person that's a potential dictator that is like clinging on to power. And I think that kind of transition, is something that is, whilst that's happened after the making of the film, but I think that's also something I was thinking through about using about bodies, about like inhabiting certain moments, my singular body through like the gesture of the voice can have impact, can materially transform some things.
So I wanted to ask, in the writing that is accompanying the film that I worked on, I used the words layer and return as ways to think about the methods that you've used in this film and the way that you engage with not just filmic material, but also folklore and different like sort of cultural imagery, specifically thinking about the oranges, which are used as like a specific way marker with their peels, as well as the birthmark, which I think I find the birthmark interesting, that it has both, there is a universal understanding of like a birthmark and what that is similar across many cultures, and then there's one that's also very specific to Mandinka culture. But I think what the film does is, by bringing a lot of these images and understandings together, there's a vocabulary of like the imagery that's created that I think is really useful. And I just wanted to ask about how that has informed or maybe contributes like your current research and your wider practice, or understanding this film within that.
If we think about another image that's not in this film but was a part of the show, and is a part of this exhibition, it's a motif which is called sun teeth, which is present on some curtains in the exhibition space. And this is a print or a stamp that was made using my baby teeth, a molar and some incisors, and to create this motif of a sun. And I think there's something in that symbol that I keep returning to. There's something about the way that the body is implicated in recreating this kind of astrological force. There's something about the sun and light and that energy that it or just maybe in terms of like folklore, there's this kind of idea that maybe people in my family will say that maybe there's like two suns, and there is like one sun which is like an African sun, which is like warm and like life-giving, and then one sun which is like a European sun, which is like very weak and watery. And And I think I really enjoy this way of like thinking through differences perhaps, or as a way, maybe one way of explaining why certain things are different in different places, why things react differently. Because there are multiples, right? Because that's what it implies, rather than saying that, if we think about it in a scientific way, it's just saying that it's multiplicity, which I think is something that I try to embody in my practice. And so returning to certain images, or creating a vocabulary, as you put it, feels important. And I feel like I'm at that stage where I'm still building it. I'm still becoming, like, trying to learn the language, become articulate in it, like understand the different registers, the different tones at which it can be spoken in. But I have always thought about the process of creating these works, and potentially Halo Nevus in particular, because it was a way of imagining and embodying something that was not immediate to me, that all the imagery that is created are they are like stand-ins or facsimiles, or they are attempts at recreating something, a memory. And so I think it feels important to be able to like shift those representations into different contexts and see how they work like at different times. As my practice unfolds.
So one last question I have is just about which was relevant to this work, and also this work in the context of the exhibition it was originally part of, is how it is that national identities are formed, and perhaps like the difference between a national identity and a cultural identity, or a national identity and a community identity or personal identity, but specifically how these are formed by particular barriers and or borders. And I think within the case of the Gambia, there's a really specific and interesting and horrific story about the borders being drawn by how far a British cannon could fire from the Gambia River, and that being the creation of the border of the Gambia, which is then surrounded by Senegal, which at the time would have been part of like French West Africa. And I just was wondering if you wanted to sort of mention like your thoughts on like this very difficult subject of identity, which I think has been used and misused in many ways recently, but maybe what is it that prevents or allows identities to like spill over from out with certain boundaries?
I guess I think about the Gambia and my work in trying to understand it is this ongoing process of nation building. And I think there have been many acts through empire, through various empires, both British and like previous to that, like Malian empires, also in terms of like if we think about like Islamic influences in the country. But I think what I'm trying to always understand is that it's a constantly shifting. It's constantly shifting, and it's maybe in these moments like the moment of this, of the unelection of Yahya Jammeh and the election of Adama Barrow, that these things become more visible. Like, what are the threads that are holding this collection of peoples, this geography, this landscape together? And I think for me, the Gambia has always been, and in terms of its significance as in relation to the, well, lastly the British Empire, but before that to the like Portuguese, has been its geography and has been the fact of this river that is so dominant and divides the country in two. And so my family live on the north bank of the river, and the main sort of town is on the south bank. Yeah, I'm not sure about what keeps. I think identities do spill over.
Yeah.
I don't know what contains them, and I think maybe that's what I find interesting. Yeah, I guess something that I've been looking at more recently was a moment after the independence, after Gambia gained independence and became a nation state and later a republic, was a moment when ID cards were imposed on the country, and there was a mass like photography project that went around the entire country, in which like photographers were sent out to take pictures for everyone for these new ID cards. And so there was this kind of moment of like, yeah, I guess literally a reflective moment of being able to like visualize the people in this land, in a nation. And I think maybe that is a moment that tries to define what an identity is, like literally.
Yeah. Very rigidly.
Yeah, very rigidly. But yeah, I think a lot of these things are done through the visual, are done through symbol. And yeah, I think that's what I try to unpack.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.